بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم halkaan waa qarinimo online oo daga barateen inaan idin soo gudbino wareysyadii xiisaha la aad nooga barateen bisha July waa 8 2008 magacaygu waa Cumar Maxamed Faarax daawadayaal maanta waxaan idin soo gudbi doonaa wareysi shir aad iyo aad u muhiim ah oo ka dhacay magaalada Toronto shirkaasi oo ay soo qaban qaabiyeen ururada Soomaaliyeed ee ka jira magaalada Toronto shirkaasi oo lala yeeshay taliyaha ciidanka booliiska ee magaalada Toronto haddaba shirkani oo ay ka soo qayb galeen dad aad iyo aad u fara badan ayaa ahaa shir aad iyo aad u xiiso badan macluumaad muhiimana la hordhigay taliyaha ciidanka booliiska haddaba recommendationkii ama codsiyadii la hordhigay taliyaha booliiska ayaa waxaa ka mid ahaa jaaliyadaha ururada Soomaaliyeed iyo booliiska in uu sidii ay xiriir u yeelan lahaayeen xiriir joogto ah iyo wada shaqayn si dhibaatooyinka jaaliyadda ee xagga ammaanka wax looga qabto qodobka labaad oo ah in ilmihii ama caruurtii Soomaaliyeed ee la dilay ama la dhaawacay ee ilaa iyo hadda aan la xalinin kaysaskoodii ama dambiyadii laga galay oo dadkii dhibaatadaas geystay aan faral ugu hayn in booliiska ay warbixintii ugu dambeysay iyo baaritaankooda meesha uu marayo in ay keenaan especially ayagoo siinaya macluumaad qoraal ah waalidiintii dhalay caruurtaas qodobka saddexaad oo ah in la sameeyo qof u dhaxeeya jaaliyadda iyo booliiska oo haddii jaaliyadda ay wax dhiba qabto ama ay codsi rabto in ay hay'adda booliiska u gudbiso ama booliiska oo rabo inuu wax codsi ah u soo gudbiyo jaaliyadda in maaragtay qofkaasi uu ka soo qaado una geeyo booliiska qodobka afaraad oo ah in la qoro officers ama ciidamo booliis ah oo ka tirsan jaaliyadda Soomaaliyeed si booliiska iyo jaaliyadda u dhaxmaro isfaham iyo wada shaqayn joogto ah oo ay inta badan waxa dhacda haddii booliis laga waco xaafadaha ay degan yihiin jaaliyadda Soomaaliyeed inta badan waxaa dhaxmara muran iyo yani isfahmi waa tan shanaad oo ah hay'adda booliiska lafteeda in ay la soo xiriirto jaaliyadda Soomaaliyeed ay la samaysato xiriir joogto ah si is-aamin iyo wada shaqayn halkaasi ay uga dhasho marka haddaba shirkani oo aad iyo aad muhiim u ahay oo ay ka soo qayb galeen dad aad u fara badan waxaan rajaynayaa in aad ka kororsan doontaan macluumaad muhiim ah shirkiina bilaaw ilaa dhammaad oo halkan aad ka daawan doontaan haddii alla idmo waxaan rajaynayaa maaragtay in uu noqon doono barnaamij aad iyo aad u xiiso leh oo aad maaragtay runtii idinkana aad maaragtay wax badan aad ka faa'iidaysan doontaan marka daawadayaal haddana iyo barnaamijkii daawasho wacan
Acknowledge what our guests Toronto Police Chief William Blair, Deputy Chief Kim Biography, and Imam Abdul Hai Patel. He is a member of that faculty. After that, before I welcome our guest, the Chief of the Toronto Police, Chief William, let me just clarify certain issues. First, we have to stick the agenda because we have designated speakers. So we will stick and please respect that. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable community members and leaders, on behalf of the Somali community in the Metro Toronto, let me first welcome and thank the Toronto Chief of Police, Chief William Blair, who is here with us today for his leadership and initiative for this meeting. This is the first community consultation we have within our community, and we are anticipating that there will be other consultations in the future. The Chief has requested this meeting, and it will be an information sharing that will be the starting point to improve the relationship within our community with the police. In addition, this relationship will be a vital factor as a crime intervention and prevention strategy within the Somali community. Before I welcome the Chief, on behalf of the Somali organizations and the community on large, I would like to say one thing. As a community leader, on behalf of all the Somali community organizations, Chief, we are wholeheartedly committed to start and build a good working relationship with the police, which is based on mutual respect and trust. In order to improve the situation that's facing our community, that's a practice. Let me give you a brief history. I actually tried to summarize a few points because it's almost 3 or 4 pages, the biography. Then I will try.
All of these good people know who I am. You don't have to give my entire
Then I will give in bullet points several of that. Chief William Blair was appointed Chief of the Toronto Police Service on April 26, as we all know, 2005. Chief Blair started his 3rd-year policing career as a beat officer in downtown Toronto and continued with assignments in drug enforcement, organized crime units, and major criminal investigations. As a Toronto Chief of Police, he oversaw the development of the Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy (TAVIS) to combat violent crimes. Chief Blair holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Toronto with a dual discipline of economics and criminology, and a certificate in law enforcement administration from the University of Toronto. He is a graduate of the Federal Bureau of Investigation National Academy and the Police Leadership Program for the University of Toronto, Recruitment School of Business Management, and National Executive Institute. Chief Blair lectures at the University of Toronto as well as Seneca College. Chief Blair is very active in the community organization and has served as a director and a member of the executive board of Children's Aid Society of Toronto. He is a director and member of the Honoris and Awards Committee of the St. John's Ambulance Toronto branch. Policing has been a vital part of Chief Blair's family for generations. 10 generations or 5? Yeah. He has grown up with history, tradition, and culture of the Toronto Police Services, and as a lifelong resident of Toronto, is proud and honored to be served the people of Toronto as its Chief of Police, including our community.
Thank you.
Our Chief.
Thank you for your very kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me begin with an apology. I'm very grateful for your attendance here this morning and the opportunity to meet with you. And I apologize for being a few minutes late. I would blame my driver, but the fellow who drove me today, I'm afraid I left my office too late and because I had other matters. Have been pleased this morning. But for that, I apologize because it is important that we always be respectful of each other. And I regret that I had to be late. Let me begin by telling you that I am very pleased to have the opportunity to come to speak to representatives of the Somali community here in Toronto. We are very blessed in this city. This is the most diverse city in the world. I have the privilege of being the chief of police in a city in which people come from all over the world, that come from every nationality, but also every language, every faith tradition, every culture of the world. And they come to live here in Toronto, and they live in relative peace and in harmony. And it is a privilege, but also a challenge, to provide good policing services to such a diverse people. I am always delighted with the opportunity, and I'm very grateful for the invitation here today, and for my colleagues and friends for arranging all of this work. Thank you. To bring us all together, to have an opportunity to speak to each other about the important work that we all engage in together of keeping our city safe, but also in some of the challenges that we face. And certainly some of the challenges that our young people face, all of our young people. And I am very well aware that perhaps the greatest challenge for the police service to maintain a strong relationship with the youth of Toronto, and in particular with the youth of some of our communities which face their own special challenges of language and culture and the economy and employment and all of those issues that impact all of us on a daily basis. I want to tell you a little bit about as a police car racing down the street. It happens because we have police officers who will come out into your neighborhood, speak to you as I've come to speak to you today, but also on your street, in your schoolyards, in the community centers, in all of the places where young people frequent, so that we can begin to have that conversation. We've also made some very significant changes in how we provide that service to the community. I am absolutely committed to community-based policing that is done in partnership with the people that we serve. in order to build that respectful relationship, we have invested very heavily in putting more police officers in neighborhoods. There are less officers, frankly, who are working in special squads, and far more officers that are working in neighborhoods. Our main goal is to maintain the peace, to reduce crime, to reduce victimization, to protect innocent people from those who would victimize them. And our intent is to make Toronto a safer place, although Toronto is a very safe city, let me assure you of that. But we always know that there will always be criminals, but there will always be people who will victimize others. And so our intent is to reduce the victimization, to make people safer, to help them be safe, and also to help communities build up their capacity to keep themselves safe, so that there will be more opportunity for young people, a better quality of life for everyone living in the neighborhood. People should not have to be fearful in their neighborhood. Young people should not be ashamed or embarrassed of the communities in which they live or the school in which they attend. And when they go seeking opportunities for employment or for good housing or even just simply to live as decent, honest citizens with all of the dignity and respect that comes with that, they should not be restricted from that because of where they live or the community they come from. And so we believe very strongly, I believe very strongly, that the police have a role in working with communities in order to maintain a society which is safe but also socially just. And we are trying very hard to do that. A very simple thing that we did a number of years ago is we put name tags, as you see in my uniform. Every one of my officers who wears their uniform wears a name tag. And this is not unusual in many industries, but it is unusual in the police. And my police officers have accepted this because we know that this is important. In a fundamental relationship with the people that you serve, the very first thing I would ask you if we met on the street was, what is your name? And I want you to know the names of my officers as well, because I think that does build up a relationship and some trust between us. Another important thing that we have tried to do in the Toronto Police Service, and I know it's one of the issues that you wanted to raise with me today, is we have also tried to change our police service to be more reflective of the city that we serve. And we know, as I've already said, that this is a city in which virtually every language is spoken. There are many diverse cultures here, many different faith traditions. And I want a police service that is able to speak the languages of the country, of the people that we serve, is able to and competent in the cultural practices of the various communities, and who is familiar or even practices all of the diverse faiths of the city. And so we have very, very aggressively tried to hire a police service which is more reflective of the city. In the last 3 years, we have hired nearly 1,500 new police officers, which is a lot. For the city of Toronto, that's a great number. And my colleague and friend, Deputy Chief Kim Derry, is in charge of all of my uniform divisions right across the city. And so he has nearly 4,000 people that work for him. But of those 4,000, nearly 1,500 of them are new, have been hired just in the last 3 years. And you will see this. I'm confident you will see this when you go out into the streets, when you see police officers walking down your street or riding on bicycles or driving through your community. You will see that they are a more diverse police service. And fully, we have targeted to hire more women and to hire more people from diverse communities. And fully, 53% of all of the people that we hire come from those two groups. This is an extraordinary change for our organization. And it's doing some very important things. It is helping us build a relationship with all of the diverse communities because the people that we hire speak the languages, have the cultural competencies, are from all of the communities of the city, and are known and trusted in those communities. So they can help us understand and be known and trusted in those communities as well. They also changed the police service. Let me tell you that my police service is becoming more familiar with all of the diverse communities of the city because there are police officers working side by side with them now who come from those communities. So this is a very important initiative that we have undertaken, and it is making us a better service to help keep our city safe and to deal with some of those social justice issues that I spoke of. But we face some challenges. And in some communities, and I would note in particular, within the Somali community, we have not been as successful in recruiting excellent recruits to the police service that we would like. And so it's one of the things that I would be very happy to have the opportunity to speak to you today about how we can encourage the very best of your young people to consider coming and joining our profession, joining our organization, and helping us serve this community more effectively. And so I think this is something that we would very much like your assistance in Because a community, families, parents, have a great deal of influence over their young people. And if we can make sure that the young people know that there are opportunities for them in the policing profession, and that they are welcome in our organization, and that they have a great deal to contribute to the service, but also to the community by working within the police service, I think we can attract the quality candidates into our service that we require. But let me also tell you, I want your very best. I want the very best of your young people, because I place a great deal of responsibility on them. I expect much of them, and because we have an important job to do, and so we want to attract the very best of your young people who can come and work within our profession. And finally, let me also tell you, because frankly, I came here mostly to hear what you have to say. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to speak to you, but I want to have more time to answer your questions and to receive your information, because that is very valuable to us in how we deliver service. But let me tell you about some of the things that we are doing, which I believe are very successful. I mentioned before that our first and primary intent is to reduce crime. And so far, this year, the year to date, crime is down in every category that we measure. It is down 13% right across the city, in every category that we measure. Violent crime is down quite substantially. The number of murders in Toronto, and you would never believe this if you read the newspapers or watched the news, but the number of murders in Toronto this year is down 30% compared to last year. Now, every murder is a tragedy for the city and for the families who are affected by it, every one of them. And I do not minimize every one of them. We take very, very seriously. They are the most important work that we do, to try to bring justice to those victims and to their families. But there are substantially fewer of those crimes taking place in Toronto. And this is something I think that we're working very hard towards, reducing that victimization. Crime is down in every category. And just as importantly, it's down in every neighborhood. Crime is down in virtually every area of the city. And so our efforts at crime prevention, and I will not take all of the credit for this because it's work that we are doing with our communities, that all of us are working so hard on. The schools are working hard on it, the community services, the social service agencies, the government, the business community, the police, residents, families, young people are all working hard to try to create a safer society, and it's working. This is what I wanted to share with you today, because the public perception of crime and violence in our city is frankly not as accurate as it should be. There are issues. There are safety concerns. There are things that happen in communities which cause us all concern. But this is one of the safest cities anywhere in the world. It's certainly the safest city in North America of its size. And it's getting better. Crime is down significantly this year, and it was down last year. And so we are seeing significant areas of improvement. At the same time, we are starting to see real progress in building better relationships with all of the diverse communities that we serve. And we'd like to take this opportunity, the opportunities that we are occasionally afforded because the communities welcome us, to come out and share with you our mission, our vision for the city, which is a balance between public safety and social justice. And I think that's really what is great. This is why people have come to the city. It's why they want to have their families here. It's why they want to have their businesses here. It's why they want to live here. It's because this is a city committed to both safety and quality of life and social justice. And so that is what we are as a police service committed to, because I think the service should reflect the values of the city and the values of all the people that we serve. And so that is our mission, as well as to reduce crime and reduce victimization. And we are making real progress. Now, having said all that, that is the good news. But there are challenges that we all face. And we know that some of our neighborhoods face greater challenges than others. Places where there is high unemployment, a lack of opportunity for young people, poor housing. There are a number of different factors that affect young people, particularly families of newcomers. Their youth have difficulty integration into society. It is challenges that every newcomer group has faced. Everyone, without exception. Others face it perhaps more acutely than others. And so we know that there is more work to do in those neighborhoods, where people are marginalized, where people are alienated, where people maybe are racialized. We know that there is more work to do in those areas. And so we have begun to concentrate our efforts and our resources in those neighborhoods to ensure that there is enough uniformed police officers walking in the neighborhood, talking to people to try to reduce victimization and marginalization in those areas. And we also know that working with all of our partners, we have to build up a community's capacity. We call it community mobilization. To build up a community's capacity to create more opportunity for their youth, to provide them with better role models, to improve the quality of life. We know that police have a role in that, but it's not our job alone, that we have to work with everyone to do that. And so we are also committed to that relationship, and to that partnership, and to that work of community safety on the one side, but mobilizing communities to be safer, and stronger, and more successful for everyone. Sometimes, when we go into the neighborhoods where there is a greater degree of victimization, we hear from people, we are being over-policed. I want to assure you, that is not my intent. We are trying to perhaps overprotect, over-support. These are good things, because these are the places that need us the most. Quite frankly, there are very wealthy neighborhoods in the city who do not need the police. They don't want us there. They don't require us there. And so we focus our resources where they can do the most good, and where we can protect people, and where we can reduce victimization. And so that is very much a part of what we are doing as well. I think I have spoken enough, because I do not want to take up too much of your time. I want to have the opportunity to hear what you have to say, but I'll be more than happy to answer any and every question that you may put to me. And if I have the information, we will provide it, and if we don't have the information, we'll get it for you, because that's an obligation that we have as well. And I have to tell you, we work for you. You are the citizens of the city. And I have a civilian board. My civilian board is the people I answer to, but they represent this community, they represent all communities. But we know that the people that we serve are the people of Toronto. And so, in that regard, we work for you. And if you have concerns and you have issues, we need you to bring them forward to us. And we need you to work with us. It's not simply an opportunity for you to tell us what's wrong in your neighborhood or what we're doing wrong. The obligation on both of us is to work together, to find ways to keep our community safe, to find ways for you to give your young people good opportunities, and to live a good life and a successful life. And our obligation is to work with you to achieve that. But this is very much a shared responsibility. And I must stress this with you all. This is not something where you can leave it to the government or to the police alone to solve these very complex problems that many communities face. We all have to roll up our sleeves. And we all have to work together in order to achieve this work. But I have done this for 32 years in Toronto. And I have been in marginalized communities, and I have been in poor communities. I spent most of my career in those neighborhoods because that's where our work was most needed. And I have seen that when we work together, we can make a real difference. When we both do everything that we can do, the police will do what they can do, and the community must do what it can do. But when we do it together, we can make a tremendous positive difference in the quality of life in those neighborhoods, and the level of victimization will be reduced, and the level of crime will be reduced. And we can make real progress. We have seen this in so many areas, and we are committed to doing that. So allow me, if I may, turn the meeting back over to you so that we can have a statement.
To build a better community, we have to involve all together. Let me welcome Blair to give us a brief overview of the background of Somali issues.
I'll just add that. So actually, what you've talked about, I will not, you've addressed a lot of the issues that I was going to talk about. And I'm glad that our vision is shared in terms of looking at issues of safety, as the chair, as Rashid mentioned, issue of the safety of Toronto, and Toronto to be a livable city is a vision that we all share, and we share that with you as the Somali community. As you know, as a community, we came from a place where safety is non-existent. So issues of safety and harmony is an important thing for us. That's the reason that we came here. That's the reason that we sought refuge in Canada. It was because of the importance of safety for us. So that issue we share with you, and we share the goal of improving and whatever responsibility as a community. And as you can see, the large gathering and the people who come here today, it tells you, it gives you a message, and it tells you that as a community, we are committed to do our part in terms of working with the police hand in hand and addressing some of those issues and doing our share of addressing those issues. And that includes, for example, providing information to the community, being community organizations that are here and activists and people who are here, grassroots organizers and workers who are here, to be a bridge between the police and the community and to provide that information. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background. I am sure you're already familiar with that, but just to refresh and sort of connect and make some context in terms of the link of some of the issues that that the police sees within the community, and make some context of where those issues come in. So as you might know, the Somali community arrived and settled in Toronto from 1988 but the larger settlement of Somalis moving to Toronto were from 1991 until 95. That period was the largest settlement of Somali community. And the people who came here, they came here as a result of, they were fleeing persecution. Some have experienced had firsthand experience with persecution, jail, physical and experienced trauma, both physical and psychological. And those trauma and that experience that we brought here affects the way that we live. It affects the way that we interact. It affects the way that we relate to the community. And as you mentioned earlier, that issues of marginalization directly impacts on the community, and how that community builds trust with other communities, how that community's cohesion is developed, and how that community utilizes resources and accesses those resources. So because of that, because a lot of the Somali community who came here, they came here as a result of loss, a great loss, both financially and also family and loved ones, and left a country in places they grew up in, and left there, not as a result of, because a lot of people, the difference between immigrants and refugees is a lot of people choose to leave, and they make a conscious decision and they want to come to a new place. But because this was a forced migration, there are a lot of issues that entails and that impact on those. And part of those issues is also people who are left behind, and the support, worry, constant worry. And because the community came here unprepared, and it was a forced migration, the community also came in a low income. So they had to settle in those neighborhoods that you mentioned earlier. Most of the community, for example, lives in certain areas, and those areas are predominantly community housing neighborhoods, with all of their challenges and all of their problems. As a community who is a newcomer, comes from a different socioeconomic and cultural background, being faced with all of those issues. I mean, every community has their own issues, and every group, they have their own issues. But some of the issues that our community was not familiar with, and we were not equipped to address, and we did not have the resources for example, the prevalence of drugs, gangs. All of those things are new things to us. So it takes us a while to develop resources, because when communities are faced with challenges and problems, the first thing that you go to your instincts and the things that you know and bag of resources that you have. So some of those issues were new to us. The other issues that were new to us were sort of also, as you mentioned, the typical experience any immigrants face in terms of getting reacquainted with a new culture, new system, new ways of life, climate, something as simple as the climate. All of those things took us a while, because we had to, like any newcomer community, any immigrant community, we had to go through a process of integration and getting reacquainted, and psychologically sort of dealing with the loss that we've gone through, as well as settling here and becoming and you know, developing a path for us to become the larger Canadian, part of the larger Canadian society. And that's a goal that we have, and that's a commitment that we have. The issues that you've addressed as well, poverty, negotiating identities, all of a sudden we come from a place where everybody looks like you, everybody sounds like you, we have the same culture. Not to say that we don't have problems, but all of a sudden you have different identities. we as somebody said in a focus group that I was part of, we're Black, Muslim, and newcomers, with all of the challenges and all of the complexities that those three things impact. We have it all. So we're dealing with all of those challenges, being Black, being Muslim, and being newcomers, to sum it all. There are also issues that are specific to the youth and the way they came here. Many of the youth, the young, as I've mentioned earlier, we came here in, the bulk of the Somali community came here in 1991. That's a very young community. So most of the kids that the police probably encounter, they came here as young children, or adolescents, or they came here as, or they were born here. And a lot of those things are the challenges of the first new settlers, where we're trying to figure out the answers to all of these problems, and sometimes things are missed among those youth. And a lot of it is also, there's a fact sheet where the color of poverty fact sheets, I don't know if you're familiar with it or you've seen it, that says that 70% of the Somali community is below the poverty line. So what does that say? What does that tells you is, like, for example, either people are working two, 3 jobs away from home, not having enough time and enough energy or resources to deal with the issues that their children are dealing with. A lot of other things also is parents are not familiar with most of the issues that the children are dealing with. All of the intergeneration conflict, all of these different identities, all of those issues that the children are dealing with, like racism, discrimination, safety in school, they are not familiar with. And there's a disconnect between the school and the parents because of the language, because of the culture, because all of those things impact on the way that we deal with those issues. So those issues are not insufficiently dealt with. A lot of the other things, the other issues that also is that there are a lot of Somali organizations, but the Somali organizations immediately are dealing with settlement issues and integration, and some of the issues that they're not dealing with, and they don't have the resources, they don't have the mandate, they're not giving issues of safety, issues of gang prevention, issues of drug prevention, because some of those issues, the community, for example, most of the organizations, this organization that we're host to today, Somali Immigrant Organization, is one of the well-resourced community organizations. Most of the other organizations are voluntary based. They don't have a lot of resources, and they don't have a lot of issues with a lot of resources where, for example, getting together the youth, having the children in a place where they can play, where they can, all of those issues are addressed. Homework clubs. So most of those issues is lack of resources and lack of disconnect, as well as living in poor neighborhoods. Where, for example, I used to do a group about mental health in Chesterley, for example. And as you know, Chesterley, one of the biggest problems that the Chesterley community has is lack of recreational space where the children can play, where the children can go. And many of the community neighborhoods that the Somali community lives in, those are some of the issues. So the context of the youth they're dealing with is that context. Not to say that the community, the Somali community, does not have strength and resources. And one of the strengths of, and the resources of the community, for example, is its resiliency and its resourcefulness. And the community, one of the biggest characteristics of the Somali community is we come together when there's a crisis. So if somebody is one person in the community is dealing with one issue, we come together. We come together if children are taken from the family. We come together if somebody is dealing with grief and all of that. So there are a lot of issues and a lot of resourcefulness in the community that could be utilized, not only by the police, but by the society at large, in terms of having a partnership with the Somali community to address those issues. We also have, as I said, a lot of the kids are born at that time. So we have a thriving and a youth that is the other side of the youth that you don't meet, which is the successful youth, the ones that are going to universities, the ones that are getting volunteering for work. Some of them are here today, and they're here committed to serve their community and committed to work and to address those issues. So this is the community with all its strength and some of the challenges that we all have a partnership to work with to address those issues.
Digital vision.
Welcome, Chief Blair.
Thank you.
Welcome, Chief. My name is Mohammed Jilal. I'm Executive Director, Digital Vision. I make my presentation as a personal history, as a community leader, and as a victim of gun violence. As a community, yeah, we're gonna have fun. Yeah, I'm here for working in collaborative with the police from 20 years almost. Personally, I am a member of the community CPRC, Community Policing Liaison Committee, and I'm here today for to present as a personal history, as a community leader, and as a victim of gun violence. And this is an opportunity to present about what's the picture of our community. I prepared here a brief presentation. As a community leader, we feel crippled by the death of our youth, and we lack sufficient support from the police to ensure that their deaths are acknowledged. They continue to be victims of gun violence, and their deaths go unnoticed. I lost my son to gun violence 3 years ago. He had a bright future ahead of him and loving and supportive family. He was third year at University of York University, and his death was an enormous blow to our family. There have been so many gun violence related deaths in the city of Toronto the past few years. Unfortunately, they have not all received similar attention. And on December 26, 2005, a shootout between two gangs erupted, and on Younger Street, a young girl by the name of Jane Crepa was caught in the crossfire, and it resulted in her death. She was a grade 10 student at Riverdale Collegiate Institute. It was devastating and heartbreaking that she lost her life, and we lost another young person to gun violence. Just August 8 of the same year, two young, my son and Ali Mahmoud, he lost his life to gun violence in front of Phoenix nightclub. He was out with a few friends having a good time when he was shot. It devastating my family, and we could not have survived this tumultuous experience without the support of our extended family, friends, and particularly the community at large, Somali community. The output of condolence and support carried us through this devastating time and continues to provide us with confidence that these culprits will be found. It was unfortunate that we did not receive the same support from the police during this crisis. Unlike in the incident of Jane Crepa, the culprit in Loyan shootings were never found up to today. There was tremendous media coverage around James' death, and so many people have at last recognized it, the intensity of gun violence in the city of Toronto. Furthermore, the culprits in the shooting were brought to trial and sentence. The police response to minority killing is unlikely the response to James' shooting. I am repulsed by their lack of motivation and their carelessness. Loyan's and Ali death, along with many others minorities, has been neglected, forcing many families to believe that their kids' deaths are not worth investigating. Their deaths are barely covered in the media. They are written off as a result of gun affiliations. In order to reduce gun violence in the city of Toronto, we have to find ways to prevent it. I support Mayor David Miller and his recommendation, and I did deputation to the executive committee to restrict it from our street use, our gun manufacturers, distribution, and the likes. I would like to see the government enforce strong regulations on shooting ranges and eliminate that from the city of Toronto. Furthermore, in the incident of gun violence, I would like to see great media coverage and improved reactions to this crisis. I want to ensure that minority groups receive equitable attention in these cases and that they receive greater support in eliminating gun violence. Furthermore, in order for the police and the Somali community to build stronger, trusted relationship, they need to engage in dialogue. Somali organizations and the police need to cooperate with one another. We would like to be made aware of the status updates for outstanding cases that absolutely, up to today, we did not get any information feedback from the investigators of the Toronto police. The Somali community needs to be represented in the police force, and we are asking that Somalis be hired to engage with the community in neighborhoods where large Somali population reside. We are one of the largest African community living in North America, and we represent the continental Africa. Somali police officers need to work in these neighborhoods because they better reflect the community they are serving. Our community constitutes the second largest African, as I told you. We recommend that a fast-track hiring pilot project be initiated immediately in order to recruit a modest 15 or 20 Somali police officers into the service. Such as fast-tracking hiring model has been effectively utilized in the last few years by other police jurisdictions in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Columbus, Ohio, and San Diego, California. Lastly, Toronto police actively engage and build trust between the police and the Somali community by participating in important community events such as this one. Thank you very much.
So I'm here to present the key recommendations we would like to address on behalf of the Somali community. Mohammed Jalal, he represented some of the key recommendations we would like to address. We had, for some context to the recommendations, we had a community consultation that is representative of the Somali organizations. That is representative of the Somali organizations. Okay, sorry. We had a community consultation within the Somali community that is representative of different Somali organizations, as well as key community leaders made up of youth, different service providers, mosque leaders, and different agencies within the community and key stakeholders within the Somali community. The meeting resulted in an extensive list of recommendations we would like to address on behalf of the Somali community, but today I'm just going to present just some of the key recommendations we would like to address in collaboration with the police. The Somali community organizations seek to establish relationships with the police built upon trust and cooperation, which has been addressed in the meeting, and you have shared that vision. The Somali Community Organization requests that status updates, what Mohammed Jalal mentioned earlier, for outstanding cases be made available to the families of victims of murder. As it stands, there are some Somali families who have not had closure, as the investigation of such cases have not resulted in arrests so far. The community recommends that Somali-speaking civilian community police liaison officers be hired to engage with the community and the police in key priority neighborhoods, and particularly in the metro housing, community housing units. We need to have community police liaison representatives in these communities to deal with the crime in these communities where there's a large Somali population residing, particularly as it relates to you have raised about the community policing program. So we would like that kind of initiative to be set up within Somali communities, particularly in the priority neighborhoods in metro housing units, where there's a lot of Somali representation. We recommend that the police force hire Somali officers so that the police force better reflect the community it serves. You have raised that point, and we would like that initiative to be addressed. The Somali community constitutes the second largest African Canadian community in the GTA, second only to the Caribbean community, and is not represented in the police force. We recommend that a fast-track pilot project be initiated in order to recruit a modest 15 to 20 Somali police officers into the service. These type of fast-track hiring projects have been effectively utilized in the police jurisdictions in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Columbus, Ohio, and San Diego, California, where there's even less Somali population. Toronto, we have the most Somali population in all over North America, and there's been established some type of fast-track hiring process models in other communities in North America. And we would like to also, the last key recommendation is Toronto police actively engage and build trust between the Somali community by participating in community events. So this is a list of our 5 key recommendations that we're hoping. Thank you.
Larry, for visiting us and sharing your concerns with us. Just to let you know where we're coming from, when we were preparing for this meeting, we had a meeting with community leaders, and somebody asked if the chief of police is coming, will he be accompanied by tanks and army, you know, because that's where we come from. The issues of safety, I mean, even our top law enforcement officers are being guarded. So that's where we came from. And we're grateful that we are in this great country because we have safety, good education, good health care. I just want to start with that. I've been here for 31 years, and I've seen so many police chiefs come and go. And I have to tell you that we're very confident with your leadership. You know. As far as I know, and some of my friends share that with me, you are one of the most progressive police chiefs that we have had in the city. You know, especially coming after the polarizing period that we had with the last leadership on race issues and policing theory and everything. We're very happy with your, how you engage with community policing, how you are accessible to the community, meeting with the communities, coming on TV and answering questions. And as you said, I share with you, we are not in a crisis as far as safety is concerned in the city. And, but you've heard the challenges we're facing as a community. You know, there is no crisis, but we can see and can feel that there is an impending crisis as the kids grow up now with the challenges that they have told me about the socioeconomic status of the community, where the kids are coming from. There's no preparation. And we can see, because there is a large Somali community youth, kids coming up in the neighborhoods. And I'm pretty sure that what we are afraid now is that they will get involved in drugs, gangs, and things like that. So I think the meeting that we have now is very timely, so that we can come up with solutions And the good thing is, as a community, we also do policing. We do self-policing. Most of the people in here are frontline workers. They do mediation, conflict resolution, working with youths. There's a lot of policing and crime issues that doesn't reach you because we already solved them within the neighborhood. So that's why I think it's very important that we have a good partnership. Now, I want to come back to the recommendations that Fawzia and Mr. Jiro have made, and that came out of the consultations. I think those are doable targets if we have the political will. I know you're committed to diversity as a police force, and we can see the numbers. But the numbers are also, they don't tell the whole story, because when you look at it and you say we have hired 53% minorities, and especially African Canadians, you know, the problem is that we are African Canadians, but as Deka was saying, we come from a different culture. We have a different history, with different language, different religion. So a Caribbean police officer with a Caribbean background is no less different than a Caucasian police officer, because the cultures are totally different. So I know you have a blanket hiring process, but I think, I mean, if there is a political will with the mayor, with the police services board, I think we can come up with a pilot project as the recommendation that we have. And it's been done in other jurisdictions. I've been to Columbus, Ohio, San Diego, I've been to Minneapolis, and they did a wonderful they have a wonderful hiring process. They have two types of policing over there, as part of the recommendation that we have. Number one, they have civilian community police liaison officers. They don't get paid that much. Some of them are part-time. They give them with a car. They work with the local police station and the community. A lot of things get resolved before anything happens, and also they are the ears on the ground. Before anything erupts or something is going on, they work with the community. They bring the police to the community, to the mosque. That's one track. The other track is, what they did is they created a special task force, a special pilot project that recruits, and we're not saying you have to lower the standards. I mean, university graduates, who can come into the force, but they're given the right opportunity so that they can become police officers. So I think, and I hope this is not the last meeting we have. We'll listen to your feedback, and maybe in the future we can come together and set up an advisory committee with the police and the community, and then we'll work with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Meeting on Sunday, our intention was to not have too many questions for the chief, because we have asked the questions ourselves. But earlier I was asked if you can give, take at least 3 questions and then give a final remark to the chief of the police. Question number 1, I'll give the Fatah, who's active in the community. Question number 2.
Good morning, Chief Blair.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming here today. My question is not a rather question, I think it's rather question / comment. I want to report to you 2 incidents that took place in my area. And it did happen to the 2 most vulnerable people in my community. And those are a young child and Somali girl, Somali woman. One woman was standing in trying to buy whatever from a grocery store, and they had a dispute, and the man violently slapped her. She called the police, 23 Division. They came. She was charged with trespassing. Another young man, young child at the age of 16 years old, a special kid, autistic, was kicked in the abdominal by a security guard, an evil man. When the police were called, they issued ticket trespassing with the autistic child. When they learned nothing was done to the security guard, I brought this one to your attention mainly because you talked about marginalization and alienation. I thoroughly believe that my community is being alienated by 23 Division and 12 Division. Unfortunately, some of the forces, the attitude they use towards us, towards our young boys, is that we live in an area that's called or considered by the police as a high-risk area. So when you're dealing with the young Somali man, they see the young Somali man. They do not see him as a human being, but they rather see him as an animal. And that needs to be changed. Most of my young men they are crowded in jails simply for crimes that are considered in the wealth area that you talked about, a slap on the wrist, such as trespassing. First time they go to jail for trespassing, and the child comes back from jail becoming a monster. So we're raising that monster for the city of Toronto, because that monster is being incriminated in the first place. He went to jail for crime that should not be taken to jail in the first place.
Okay, I'm going to have to respond here. First of all, I understand the passion of the young man, but there are certain inaccuracies here. No one goes to jail for trespass. It's a ticket. And having said that, if you have complaints about the conduct of a police officer, there is a process by which you can make those complaints. And if a police officer, in your opinion, has done something unlawful or has neglected a duty, hasn't dealt with something appropriately, I can't speak to your allegations this morning because I have no facts available to me about what it is you have described. But if such a thing happens, there are processes, and as a community leader, you have a responsibility to ensure that young people that you represent take the steps necessary, take advantage of the processes that exist, bring them forward, make a complaint against the police if you think that's appropriate. And there are a number of ways that can do that. You can do it in writing. You can go into any police facility, and if you don't want to go to 23 or 12, you can go into any police facility. You can write a letter to my office at police headquarters, and the matter will be investigated. I have, in every division and in my service, a very large professional standards branch who is responsible for investigating all complaints against the conduct of individual police officers. And so when you have such incidents, rather than just take one side of the story, we investigate. We go and interview all of the people involved, and we do a thorough investigation, and we report it. Anyone making a complaint against the police will receive a copy of that. Another civilian body called the Ontario Civilian Commission on Policing, in which you can make an appeal to have the matter reopened or reviewed. And so we have a very good procedure in place here for dealing with complaints of conduct against the police. In my experience, there are many sides to every story, and that's why it's important to investigate and get the facts on these matters. And we would very much appreciate it. As the Chief of Police, I am responsible for the conduct of every man and woman that works in my organization. It is my responsibility in law. And so if you have a complaint about the conduct of a police officer, then give us an opportunity to investigate and get the facts. I have been involved in very many of these things in 32 years, and because of different perceptions and different perspectives, and I'm not saying that the perspectives are wrong, I'm saying that you see your world from your side, the officer may see it from another side. That's why we want to have the opportunity to conduct an investigation. If a police officer is not conducting themselves appropriately, then I will deal with that. That's my responsibility. Sometimes people, and I never will come before you and say that my people are perfect. Of course they're not. We recruit from the human race. And human beings will occasionally do what human beings do. But at the same time, quite often people need an explanation of why decisions were made. But your suggestion that we are charging someone with trespass, they would then go to prison and become a monster, quite frankly, is a little overspoken. Because no one goes to jail for trespass. They go to jail for other criminal offenses. We know that they don't go to jail for minor matters. And so usually it deals with more serious matters of violence and or drugs for which people normally go to jail. That is our experience.
Question number 2, Samson.
I appreciate and how you started with for hiring, putting more police on the streets. And that's a good thing. So to continue, we appreciate that. But my question is that the hiring more police, is that part of community policing also? Or is it the police officer on the streets? students to be a police, to get that experience, how the police work and stuff like that. That's also a problem for our community. 2007, 2006, we're trying to participate, I myself trying to send some students in our divisions in nearby Scarborough. All the students came back because they have a fear from the police. So what I'm thinking about, can we have an initiative that can breach that fear between our youth and the police? You can see the stress.
Yes,
the
I
youth trying
understand.
to represent to you something that is not supposed
No,
to.
I understand, and what we would like to do is, because you can't start just at hiring the police. We have to start younger
Yeah.
in order to build that trust and some relationship. And so certainly we can place some emphasis in identifying some really good young people to come into the youth and policing program, because they can come and work with us this summer. It gives us an opportunity to learn these are pretty decent young people, and they all are, by the way. Interestingly enough, when they come to us, most of them are not interested in policing as a career. When they leave us at the end of the summer, 40% say they want to become police officers. It's a good thing. I like this. This is one of the reasons we work in those communities where these young people are from, in the high risk. I almost said it again. High priority neighborhoods. I apologize. we have to in the high priority neighborhoods. Now, you talk about the hiring, and I will speak to this a little bit more in my remarks. We have undertaken a number of mentoring programs and recruitment programs within the Somali community over the past several years. We have done it with other community leaders. There have been many efforts to try to recruit people into our service. We have faced some challenges. Sometimes it was language barriers, sometimes there are other impediments, but we have not been as successful in attracting the very best of Somali youth from Toronto into the Toronto Police Service. We could use some help. And so I make a request of all of you to help us with this.
That's the fear.
I have a two
Omar Empire. I'm
This is the name of the game.
Paranima Online News.
Yes.
So, all our questions are already present in front of you. And just, I would like to know, everything, good things you need to do needs some money. And when I heard from the news, or like read on the newspapers, we heard that even from the mayor of Toronto says, we like to hire more police officers, put on the streets, but we don't have the resources. So, is there any plan? I know it's in your plan or in your agenda. Is there any promise from the federal government or provincial to give you more money and put more police on the street? Because the safety, without safety, there's no life. That would be played.
The federal government has made a promise. They made it in January 2006. They have not yet fulfilled their promise. But they made a promise for 2,500 more police officers in municipalities across Canada. And of course, the City of Toronto is by far the largest municipality. The money has been is flowing through the provincial government, and the plan, after all of the different government groups took their money, the plan is to put 42. Out of 2,500, 42 would come to Toronto. I think this is absurd. But that's the way it is. I have to tell you though, there is a limit on how much we can ask the taxpayers to pay for policing in this city. One of the things I believe very strongly is we have an obligation to do the very best we can with the money we have. Policing is expensive. Of your tax dollars, 21 cents on every tax dollar that you pay in property taxes in Toronto comes to policing. And so we believe very strongly that it is our responsibility to give you a good return on your investment in public safety, and to do the very best we can with the resources that we have. And I have to tell you, I'm doing my very best to put more police officers on the street. I try to find savings within my budget without going and asking for more money. We have also received some support from the provincial government for our project we call Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, TAVIS. And so we received some funding from the province that has been very helpful in that. But I have to tell you, I am not advocating for more money for police. I advocate very strongly to maintain what I'm able to use, but I advocate more strongly, frankly, for more investment in community, more creation of opportunity for young people. We will work with what we have. And I know that's a little unusual for a police chief to tell you, but...
And ethnic lines in some cases, like there is a Chinese community, but now the Chinese community said not everyone looks Chinese, but they're not all Chinese. Japanese say we are not Chinese, the Koreans say we are not Chinese, so there is also a call for establishing a Pacific Rim or South Pacific Committee, something like
And it is
that.
done.
And it's done already. Thank you, Chief. The Chief has upgraded a lot of committees. So there is a black committee in which everyone black was Caribbean. Africa was not even there in the beginning. Yeah. And then we have Ibrahim Absia sitting on this black committee, also from the Somali community as a liaison. And then we had the other South and West Asian Committee, which was South Asian Committee in the beginning, and that was changed to South and West Asian to embrace the other Asian countries which were not represented. However, in the post 9/11 period, immediately after, the Muslim community became a very solid target for hate crimes and other issues. So we became a big victims in the city of Toronto. So the then chief, we approached the chief and asked to establish a separate Muslim community because the Somalis don't fit in, if they're considered African, the issues are Muslims. The Turkish community and the Balkan community, like Bosnia and others, who don't fit in any racial minorities at all. They are Caucasians. They are not represented. So we formed a Muslim Consultative Committee. It was established as a pilot project subcommittee, but then immediately as soon as the chief took the office, he upgraded to a full status committee. So I give a hand to the chief. That happened within 2 months, I believe, when we honored the chief as his. So now we have Said. Please, we have. Please, let me finish. Yes, it's up to the chief now to on your recommendation. I'm just explaining the consultative process that is going on at the moment. Said Omar is represented the Somali community because we had to include one person from each ethnic community in the Muslim community. Now, one of the things that we have would also add to this is that the others are welcome, but the chief can consider the other advisory committee that he may see fit. But there is a need for sensitivity training. Now, the recruitment process back in the 80s, I've been serving as a volunteer for over 20 years. It was very hard for people to get in to pass the test. Over the past 20 years, we have worked to sort of bring down the criteria without sacrificing the police standard. With COVIX College, the training college, and others, and the criteria now is somewhat different from what it was, and as a result, many people have entered the police force from immigrant communities. Now, this is not the end. Yeah, the Somali issues, please, let me finish, brothers and sisters. Brothers, if you can just show 1 minute of respect. The Somali issues are different, even though I'm speaking as a Muslim, that as a South Asian background, I'm not familiar with many Somali cultures. So having a Muslim officer is one thing, but then we need Muslim officers from just about every ethnic community. And Somali culture is also very different because Somali forms the largest component of the Muslim community in the city of Toronto. So the issues with Somali community, as you heard, Chief, should be reckoned with, and in the college, perhaps from within the Somali community, we have experts here who can provide that sensitivity training that is needed. So I hope that will also.
And we've spoken about my time, but quite frankly, all of us, every single one of us has come here because we care about the same things. You care about your community, you care about this city, and you care about the safety of your young people. I can hear that in all of your voices and see it in all of your eyes. I thank you for your commitment, and I thank you for your willingness to come here, because I know sometimes it takes courage to come and meet with the police in some communities, because people will challenge you and say, why would you go and talk to them? But I appreciate the courage that it takes, and I appreciate the effort that it takes to come and be here with us today, and the effort that obviously many of you put into on the weekend to come up with your recommendations. And I want to assure you that I will give this very serious consideration, and I will also make the agreement. Our consultative processes are something that we are quite proud of. We've worked hard in building consultative committees. We have excellent partners in those consultative committees who come and work with us every day. That was intended always to be inclusive. It is never intended to exclude anyone. And so if this community has very specific concerns to its community and their young people, and if we need to work together on those things, we will do that. So let me assure you of that. And I think this is something that is fair and tragic in our society, something that can and should be addressed, because I think there is a tendency in some areas, in some circles, to discount victims, certain victims. And there is no discounting of victims in the Toronto Police Service. I want to assure you of that.
Now, it does not mean that we can, in every case, family see. I wish that simply the application of resources and will to do is the case, but that is not the case. And unfortunately, there are certain types of crimes in which, and a drive-by shooting is the worst of these examples, where there is not very many witnesses, where there is not a lot of forensic evidence available to us. Quite often, there is no clear motive, because in the case you mentioned of your son from August of 2005, these were good young men that would have made them more likely to be a victim. It's very difficult to even determine what could possibly be the motive of such a horrible crime. And so, in some murders, it's quite apparent who is responsible for this, because of an ongoing dispute between individuals. In some crimes, and you mentioned the Boxing Day thing, that case was, for us, it was a very serious crime, but no more serious than the others, except we had hundreds of witnesses. And all of whom wanted to come forward, all of whom were coming forward and providing us with information. We had 2 young men in custody that was used in the shooting. And so from that, there are many places to take your investigation. In other crimes, there are not witnesses who have the courage or the character to come forward. In other crimes, there is not very much evidence. I would hope very sincerely that all of you would believe that the police service take these crimes any less seriously than others. It is, you can only work with the evidence that you have available to. In that case, in the case from August of 2005, we offered a reward. In that case, I posted a $50,000 reward in an effort to try to induce people to come forward to give us information. They did not. We have spoken of this publicly on very many occasions. And I remember, actually, Mr. Layton, Jack Layton, called me a number of times on that particular crime, and I think your family may have been in contact with Mr. Layton. Mr. Layton has advocated very effectively for your family in this thing. And in the case, we went back to the homicide squad and said, go back to the family and speak to them. We posted the reward. Unfortunately, there's not an awful lot of evidence. And this happens to us. It's extremely frustrating to the police in these terrible, senseless, tragic loss of life, where young people are victimized, and the young, and yet they are victimized. If there are no witnesses, if there is no forensic evidence, if there is to bring the case before the courts, it can be tremendously frustrating. Not taking these crimes so seriously, but let me assure you that my people are absolutely dedicated to solving every one of these crimes. There are no victims more important than other victims. Even frankly, and it's certainly not the case with your children, but there are some cases where people have been involved in very serious crime themselves who are then murdered. And we work on those cases just as vigorously, because their families are victims. We know this. Their mothers who have lost a son, they're not responsible for the son's misconduct, but they have lost a son. A community is damaged and wounded by these things, as clearly your community has been damaged and wounded by these things. I have to tell you that earlier this year we became quite concerned. I became quite concerned, and I made inquiries of my intelligence unit and the people working in all of my neighborhoods, because we saw the victimization of Somali youth starting to increase at the earlier part of the year. Down at Lawrence Heights, in the Amaranth Court shooting, in which 5 young men were shot, I believe those were all Somali youth that were shot. We had 2 young people in Regent Park that were shot. They were shot in the legs about 2 months ago. And they were both Somali youth. And I became quite concerned, quite frankly, that someone was targeting specifically Somali youth. We have looked in those investigations. We apprehended the offender in the first one. We have good information that we are following as vigorously as we can. In the first case, 1 young man died. We were able to apprehend both the shooter and his accomplice in that case and bring them before the courts. But again, we had video, which is invaluable in these investigations. We put it into the public.
That's your father,
Again, my sympathy to you, sir.
Thank you.
We understand how serious these things are. My concern was, is something going on in the community or something going on among young people that is leading to this escalated level of violence. And I can tell you that we have not found indication that there is something broader going on, but we will be vigilant about it. We will be careful to make sure that these things don't happen. Because I want to assure you that all young people, including your young people, are as precious to us as they are to you. And when they are victimized, it is a tragedy for all of us. A crime against any of us is a crime against all of us. And we believe this absolutely. And I understand your frustration, and I would like nothing more than to bring you the resolution of your son's killer. If we are able to do that, we will do our very best to do that. And we will hire 250 police officers this year. Every year, I have police officers who retire or otherwise leave the service. And so on average, we hire between 250 and 290 police officers each year. And so I have a class that will begin its training in August, which will have 120 new police officers in. In December, I will hire another class, which will likely have 120 new police officers in. And we will do this 3 times a year. And so there are lots of opportunities. So when we talk about having a fast track program, I know in Columbus and Minneapolis, police services are not good. And so if they've had to hire people there, and I accept your observation that they have a good system there, but they are not hiring people who are really hiring. And like I said, we've hired 1,500 people, which is probably the most in any city in North America except New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. So we've had the 4th largest hiring. And it's very clear. We are continuing to hire. There are opportunities for young people. We come out and will happily do any of your community events. If you're having a Somali community event and you want my recruiting officers there, really well. We will come and we will provide information to you. We also have mentoring programs and we require the assistance of community members. And frankly, if you have a young person who's interested in policing, don't send them to police headquarters, bring them to the police headquarters. A recruiting officer sends a second class. Bring him as a good candidate who wants to be in the police. That will mean a lot to us. It has some strong community support. We do very extensive background checks. I'm very careful about who is in the police. Because they have some frustration. But we review those extensively. One of the things we can do is we come and ask the police about this information. Is she a good person? And by the way, we often talk about police recruits as Eve, but about 25% of everyone we hire is a woman. And so don't be discouraged here. If women are very welcome in my profession. And they do every job. They hold every rank. And there is no area of expertise or specialization that women are not perfectly capable of doing every job that we do. And so I want to encourage that as well. And we will have success in this. We will be able to find good recruits because your young people are every bit as good as everybody else's young people. We just have to encourage the very best of them to come forward and to keep trying until we can get them through. And so that is my point on that. The hiring, The civilian community police liaison officers is a bit of a challenge, quite frankly, for me, and it's because the law in Ontario does not allow me to have such people. But what we do have is other employment opportunities in policing that may be good ways to come into policing. And if someone is not necessarily fully qualified to become a police officer, or is not certain about becoming a police officer, we also hire court security officers who are special constables and parking enforcement officers who are special constables. I have nearly 1,100 such employees in my service. And so if young people are not certain about a career in policing but want a good job, those are two good jobs where they can come and work for us. They can earn a good living. They can learn something about the profession of policing, and if they want to then transition to become a police officer, frankly, it is an easier jump because they're already within our service. And so that's something that you might want to consider as well. And I've spoken to the closure of those things. If there are concerns that arise, by the way, anywhere in the community about the safety of your youth, I'm very committed to preventing their victimization. It is sometimes very challenging, as we've heard, when they are victimized. And because these things often, a shooting that takes place in the middle of the night, in a quiet area where there are not a lot of witnesses. And this is why they take place in those places, because the people who will murder others do not wish to be caught. When those things take place, they're very hard to solve. But I think we can do a lot of things to prevent and make them more likely to be victimized. And that is not the case in every case by any stretch of the imagination, but we do see that more young people, particularly if they're involved in gangs or in drugs, that they are far more likely to be not being involved in those things that go beyond the and if they are involved in gangs or in drugs, they are more likely. And when that happens, families feel the loss just the same. And so if your young people are being involved in drugs, we can help you with that. And all of the help needn't be that they go to jail. There are other ways in which we can reach out to those young people and engage them and create better opportunities for them. We want to put them in better shape, and we can help you with that area to be very truthful to do that success. I do not measure my success by how many people we take to. I do not measure our success by how many calls we get, how many friends we do, how many purchases. That's not the real measure of success. The real measure of success is the safety of our community. The real measure of success is young people succeeding and realizing the full potential as citizens and members of your community. So that's what we want to success. And it will be, by the way, you'll have to appeal the charges and another one will agree with that, but that's very well. But ultimately, I think that is the goal for us to work together. And not become victims, and not get involved in criminal activity themselves, and go to jail and pay as much as possible. And I don't think anyone is safe there. I think our better effort is to invest in our capability and invest in our communities and to commit ourselves to keeping our communities safe. And so that is the end of my remarks. I know I spoke too long, and I often do.
Once again, I want to thank, I said earlier, and we keep repeating, we're very honored, Chief.
I'm grateful for the invitation.
I want to thank you very much. We'll continue to I'll follow up on this information. I want to thank everyone, and I want to thank
Voice.
Let me just express the commitment of the Toronto Police Service to continue to work with the leadership of the Somali community so that we can work together to reduce its victimization, to attract more Somali recruits to the Toronto Police Service so that we might be better able to serve the community. I would also welcome continuing dialogue. People have concerns about safety in their community and want to work with the police. We are very open for them to do that, both locally at the community police liaison committee level and with our consultative committees.
Okay, a lot of fathers and mothers still believe as you said, like if anyone has a concern, you send you in writing. So what did you say to those
have complaints about the conduct of the police, then by all means get in contact with us. But I think we need to do work to ensure that young people don't get into trouble with the law in the first place. Because if they are already in jail, then perhaps we have